There are many ways I can introduce this next guest. Pro Football Hall of Famer is one.
I like that one.
Super Bowl champion is another. 11-time Pro Bowler is another. NFL Network compadre is another. Great friend is another. But I'm going to introduce him in the way that I think will delight him the most, because Rod Woodson, I really appreciate it. Now joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show, the only person at this desk whose alma mater beat Ohio State this year, Rod Woodson.
Yeah.
On the Rich Eisen Show.
Boiler up, hammer down.
How about that? Was that out of all the ways I
couldn't believe it.
Well, I'm just, how do you like the introduction?
I love the introduction.
Because I kind of clown myself just to make you happy.
I know. That's, that was a tough one.
You think?
Yeah. That was a tough one.
You think, Rod? That's some cogent analysis.
But you know what? But one thing I do love about Big Ten football is back. People, at least we're playing decent football around, and we had some arguments about being in the playoffs. So hopefully,
whose arguments about being in the playoffs?
I'm just saying,
Big Ten hasn't been in 2 years now.
I know,
man.
but I'm saying we had arguments this year about the Ohio State being there.
Okay.
But them losing to Purdue the way they did,
right,
is the main reason they're not in.
See, now how do you take it, being obviously prideful for that victory? Your coach was in demand. Louisville wanted him. Because obviously that's where Braun went to school, and he stayed put. And there's a lot of prideful, and the way that they handled their business that night. Tyler Trent is just a remarkable human being in the way that the community surrounded him. It was nothing. You should puff your chest out. And yet the whole conversation was, you can't let Ohio State in. They lost to Purdue.
I know, that's like. I know.
How many times did you hear that?
I mean. Every show that I turned on, when they talked about Ohio State, they just kept saying, you can't put Ohio State in, they lost to Purdue.
Right.
And I'm like, I was getting a little upset. Like, Purdue's not what it used to be. Braun was bringing this thing back.
Right.
So there's some pride that goes on with that. But, there's some truth to it, because, our legacy is not we're not a, football powerhouse yet. But we're coming.
I like it, Rod. I like it. All right, let's get into last night's game. That 2-point conversion going forward. I mean, Anthony Lynn, that was a brilliant decision, because if you lose, you're still the 5 seed. If you win, man, you've got a great shot at being a 1 seed right there on the spot.
And that's the key. I think the pros outweighed the cons.
They did.
So it was an easy choice. Now. What they were doing, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs secondary, I have no idea.
What was happening?
They just had stacked that. They stacked it to the right, what we call closet, because they were in close.
Right.
So they had 2 receivers to the right hand side, and they just ran opposite routes. And then now, I think it's sensible. I think he was saying we're going to play in and out, what we call banjo, and the receivers went in.
The defenders.
And then the receivers just switched positions. One ran inside, one ran outside, and both of the defenders went inside. And that's what happens, though, when you get lack of communication pre-snap. They don't know what you're doing, and both guys stays on a guy. There wasn't a guy 5 yards around him.
And it didn't look, I know, Brockman, you thought it was a pick play.
It wasn't a pick.
So it didn't even...
It wasn't like the natural pick, because when you come into the new rule in the league is that you can block 1 yard down the field,
right?
And now when you're on the 1 yard line or on the 3 yard line, you can block on at least the 1 or the 2-ish, get away with it. You can really pick that guy. They didn't even do that. They just ran a route.
Well, we just had your fellow Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson, fellow first ballot Hall of Famer LT, on the show, and he says without Eric Berry, this defense is as pedestrian as it has been all year long, and that's going to be their problem moving forward.
Eric wouldn't have been there covering, though.
Right.
Those are 2 corners. This is a nickel in the corner covering. Now, Eric did make some plays, though. When he played in the first half, Eric was flying around to the ball. He made some tackles for losses. He did get some of the guys in position. He's a tremendous player. And when he's not in there, when you don't have a leader, I know Houston's up front, but when you don't have a leader on the back end, you don't make a lot of plays. And we've seen that throughout the whole year with this football team. Offensively, they're exciting. They put up a lot of points. They were even running the ball last night. And defensively, they're 32nd in the league for a reason.
I know Chiefs fans are sitting there saying, oh, here we go again. Great start to a regular season, mediocre finish, and then trapdoor opens in the playoffs, or Mahomes is just such a game changer, he's going to be the difference maker? Which one do you believe, Rod?
Well, when you have to, and go back to them playing Baltimore 2 weeks ago, it's 4th and 17. He has to roll out to his right-hand side, throw the ball back across the field in the middle of the field, which you should never do.
I know.
And he's been doing it all year, and he's getting away with it. And then Tyreek Hill comes in out of nowhere and catches the ball. When you got to convert plays like that on a consistent basis week after week to win, that's not sustainable. It's just not. I mean, it looks great, and we have fun with it. But over the course of the year, and especially in the playoffs, your weaknesses come to the forefront in the playoffs.
Well, you could also say it's not sustainable to keep coming down from double digits on the road, like Phillip Rivers just did in Pittsburgh, down 16, and then last night down 14 3 different times. I mean, that's not sustainable either.
Yeah, I mean, when people talk about, even though they are saying the most balanced team in the league right now might be the LA Chargers. I almost said San Diego.
By the way, I knew that was going through your head right there, too. It's going to take a while.
It's like they really should be in San Diego. But anyway, they're here.
Yes.
They're playing good football.
They are.
And, I mean,
last night it was without Melvin Gordon, without Eckler, without Keenan Allen, too.
And but Phillip, he's 37. He's slinging that rock. I'm that country boy. I love him, man. I love his feistiness. I love everything about him. He can't run from here to there in 20 seconds, man. He is like, I don't know if in the prime, if Dan Marino or him are the slowest, but they both can throw the football.
Well, it's interesting, Rod Woodson, you mentioned Marino, because Mahomes could be the youngest MVP since Marino's MVP season.
Yes.
Because of the way that he's lighting up. When Chris Brockman gave the update to the poll question just last segment, and it was Mahomes, Breeze, Rivers, or Gurley for your MVP choice, you said from the Callaway corner, I don't know about Breeze. What do you mean by that?
And the reason I said it is because the last 2 weeks has been pedestrian for Breeze. And when you're the MVP, it has to be every week. And this young kid is crazy at it. He's been throwing the football extremely well all year long. From week 1 to now. Now, one of my arguments is I think a lot of people should consider Aaron Donald. Because Aaron Donald, what he's doing from the deep tackle position.
What is he doing? Tell me.
I don't know if he got any sacks this past week, but before that he had 16.5 sacks. Tackles for losses, the quarterback pressures. Those things you normally see from defensive ends. But defensive tackles where they get double teamed on a consistent basis, he is a beast inside, and nobody's even talking about him. You won't see this again. And you'll see it again from him. But on the normally from the inside position, they don't get pressure like that. He's getting double teamed constantly, and he wins. And he's still putting those 330-pound guards and centers right in the lap quarterbacks. Nobody talks about him. And I know, last time it happened, the only MVP that happened for the league is LT. He had 20.5 sacks. They had a really good defense. So maybe that rush defense, some of the lacking of, they're not tremendously good at stopping the run on a consistent basis.
Right.
That hurts him. But what he's done this year has been amazing.
Rod Woodson here on the Rich Eisen Show. Here's a couple of stats of Mahomes that leaps out about his MVP resume.
Right.
His 243 yards passing last night, fewest total in a game from this year.
243.
243.
That's
okay.
all.
And he has the highest passer rating in the National Football League in losses, 114.6.
Oh,
so it's not like the losses come with him clunking.
Right.
I just was so tough for me to wrap my arms around having somebody that young in his first full season be the MVP.
It's only one.
But it's true.
It's only one game I can remember that he kind of shot his team in the foot, and that was the New England game when he threw the pick going into the end zone.
Then the second half happened.
But the second half happened. But he's a tremendous player. All the things that he does, you cannot put on a tape and go, hey, quarterbacks, I want you to look at this because I want you to play like that.
Right.
No. It's very rare. And a lot of people have said it, and it's so true. He reminds you of Favre, that he'll roll out of the pocket and he'll sling it and throw it any which way that he wants to.
He reminds you of Favre in that regard, too. He had 2 left-handed throws last night.
Yes.
2. He will just make these crazy throws that you don't think anybody else can.
The no-look last
The no-look. I mean, exactly.
Crazy.
So there's the Favre. Then there's the rolling out of the pocket, making throws against the grain of the body that you don't expect coming, like Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
And then there's the play begins half the time after he gets hit.
Right.
of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yes.
It's kind of like all rolled into one millennial body. It's kind of crazy to see right now.
But the thing happens, though, it catches up to all players. It really does.
What do you mean?
So what I mean by that is, though, think about how many touchdowns Brett Favre's thrown for, but think of how many interceptions he's thrown.
True.
So
he was a leader in interceptions. In that. He still is. He still is. He was in touchdowns, but that's not anymore.
So, you look at a young kid like this doing so many great things, and he has so much confidence in his arm, and he's throwing the ball in these small windows. If DBs just turn their head, which they don't for some odd reason, the ball's right by your head. It's by your ear hole. You have opportunities. But, one thing I do say, he's exciting to watch. He's fun to watch. Is it sustainable? For this year it is. And he's played well. And I think he is by far the MVP candidate, should win it, because he's played lights out from week one all the way through.
And we'll see what happens in Seattle next week. And if he lights it up there, then I think he wraps up the MVP, if not the bye week for the Chiefs. And that could be just 10 days away. We'll see how it all plays out. Rod Woodson here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's talk Steelers, Rod.
Oh.
What in the world happened with Roethlisberger last week with the ribs?
I'm listening to Mike. I'm listening to Mike. Mike said that he got a shot, and the shot had to sink in, so to speak, and get into the ribs to take the pain away. I believe Mike. I believe there's a lot of people that's talking about Mike Thomas. I think that is crazy.
Well, I say here all the time, like Mike, if Steeler Nation finally wants to bounce him, guess what? He, speaking on behalf of every other team that's going to be hiring a new coach,
he will be gone.
Thank you. Okay,
absolutely.
So I will say that, but it was just bizarre and strange, and the fact that they didn't say that after the game, that hey, they needed a shot and it had to sink in. Instead, it was, well, there was a flow, and then we find out from Big Ben and Mike Tomlin that the equipment is old, and they didn't really get a good read on things. It was just a bizarre explanation, and how it came out in dribs and drabs makes you think there is something else going on there.
First of all, there's no problem with the offense. The offense is, they put up points, they put up 21, they still lost. It's the defense, and that's been the issue for several years now. It's like somewhere along the line, the defense has to be adaptable. We can't always say, well, we do what we do. I go back to San Diego, and they put Keenan Allen at number 3, and we just kept the linebacker. You just kept the linebacker there over and over and over. So the linebacker has to cover the best route running receiver in the National Football League. That's crazy. And you never make an adjustment, and you turn back around and go, well, we do what we do.
Right.
That you can't say that. You have to be adaptable. If you want to win, if they're going to take advantage of your defense, you have to change something.
Well, who's that on?
That's on Keith Butler. He's a DC. I know Mike has a DC background, and he has some, his fingerprints on some of the defense, because they do play Tampa, the Tampa 2 now. They play a lot of 2-man or cover 5, which is when the corners and the nickels are playing underneath the receivers, and you got a two-man shell on top. They do that a lot more than they've previously done it in the past. But it's Keith Butler. You have to say, if they're putting Keenan Allen there, I have to make an adjustment. Either I go man-to-man, and I put a like body on him. You can't tell me it's 3rd and 4. It's a critical situation. You have to get the stop to get the ball back for your offense to try to go back down and score, and you put your linebacker on him again. All they did was clear out the 2 receivers on the right-hand side. Keelan hesitated and ran it out. That was the easiest 3rd down conversion that Phillip Rivers had all year.
Well, we had, again, LaDainian Tomlinson on last hour, Rod Woodson, and he said that if Pittsburgh doesn't adjust on defense against New England.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they always allow all the underneath, and that's where Edelman and Gronk just have a feast, that if they don't change, they're going to get beat.
You're right, Rich. He's absolutely right. That I can't remember what year they beat New England. The Steelers did. But that year, they played man-to-man. They came in and said, we're not giving you all this underneath stuff. We're not going to sit back in these zones and let your receivers just play isolation against our linebackers. We're going to get in your faces. We're going to play man-to-man. You don't have any real fast receivers, so go play man-to-man and get after the quarterback. That's what you have to do with Tom. You don't do that to Tom Brady. That's not even funny. I mean, he's going to pick you apart. And so if they don't make that adjustment with Tom in this game, it's going to be a long – and if they lose, you got to remember what Baltimore's doing. And they have the Saints next week,
yes,
talking about the Steelers.
Yes.
And they finish up with the Bengals, which is not a give me. It's a divisional game.
Well, excuse me, don't sleep on the Cleveland Browns also, Roderick. The way that they are playing right now.
With Baltimore, yes.
This is a huge game, Cleveland and Denver.
Yes.
Let's just say Baker Mayfield is, in fact, the unluckiest lock of the week, as I already put my marker on it.
I wonder if he wakes up dangerous.
He wakes up dangerous every day. He wakes up dangerous in Denver, which, by the way, with altitude is particularly dangerous.
Yes.
Okay. So, although I don't know if there's any scientific empirical evidence to back up that. Wins that one. Then home for Cincinnati, which I know he's not a gimme, but there's Hugh Jackson there, and I think they would like to give him the Heisman again at the 50-yard line.
You better believe that
with the dog pound in full throat. And then they're at Baltimore.
Yes.
And we saw an Ohio quarterback make a throw in Week 17 in that building that made him the folk hero of Western New York. If you recall, that's how things ended.
Yes.
Don't sleep on the Cleveland Browns is what I'm saying, Rod.
You know what? Listen, that number is 6th spot right now for the wild card.
Up for grabs.
It's up for grabs. It really is. That's a lot of work that they still have to do. And they have to hope that the other teams in front of them lose. Mm-hmm. So that's a good wish list. It really is. I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, I don't know if they can beat Denver, even though their defense, especially without, you don't have your top corner. Mm-hmm. They do have a running game. And the little fella, I give him a hard time and talk about Baker Mayfield, but he plays well. He has that dog in him.
He sure does.
That if he's your guy, you love him.
Yeah.
If you play against him, you absolutely hate him.
Don't you want that guy?
You do.
Who is that? Who is that guy on your team?
Oh man, we had multiple guys like that. Greg Lloyd was. People love to hate Greg Lloyd. He had a disposition that was like no other.
He woke up dangerous.
He woke up really dangerous.
A lot of dangerous wake-ups for him.
But, you want that type of player on your team. You want that guy that has that crazed dog in him, but it's tamed, and he knows how to play with that. He does a really good job of getting in and out of the pocket, looking down the field. He knows when to run, when to throw. He's come in playing well as a young player. And, hopefully, I think he can sustain it. They got a lot of young talent in Cleveland.
They sure do.
They really do. Now they got to see is Greg the head coach? Is he going to be that guy?
It's a lot up in the air, but now, in the next 3 weeks, all I'm saying is do not sleep on the Browns. A couple more minutes left with Rod Woodson here. Perfect guy to ask this question. You played on that Ravens defense that so many people think is the greatest of all time.
I would agree for a year.
Okay. Best defense in the National Football League right now, Bears or Cowboys? Who do you choose?
Oh, my gosh. That's a tough one. I'm going to take the Bears because they get the ball. They cause havoc already. They make it tough on quarterbacks. They do have issues at times getting gashed in the running game, but they get turnovers. I think they have like 30-something turnovers, comparable to, I think the Cowboys at one point only had 10. Mm-hmm. They might be at 15-ish, 16-ish, 17-ish right now. They just don't turn the ball over like the Bears. And when you turn the ball over and you give your offense a short field, it's a lot easier to score in the National Football League. And the way they do it's very similar to kind of like Dallas. They don't blitz a whole bunch.
Don't have to.
Now, but on the back end for the Bears, they get the ball. I mean, Eddie Jackson didn't think he was going to be getting pick sixes like that, and he's gotten 2 this year. Amos, who was a corner at Penn State, becomes a free safety. He's playing well. Fuller, always been inconsistent. He is getting picks crazy. He's just believing in what he sees. And all these guys in the back end, they understand one thing. Their front four are going to get a pass rush, so they're not going to get double moved. They can put their foot in the ground and go get it. So I think it's the Bears. Those guys have played really well.
But you had to think twice about it.
I really did.
Jalen Smith and Van Der Esch and those front four.
Hey, I love Jalen Smith. He's from my hometown, Fort Wayne, Indiana, even though he went to Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. But those guys can run. And what they did, they opened everybody's eyes when they played against the Saints.
Mm-hmm, they did.
I mean, people knew about them already in the football world, but everybody on the globe know how good they are now.
And Byron Jones is really good, too. That kid can cover.
he's Connecticut guy who had all the measurables at the combine.
He had a great day in Indiana too.
He did. He had a great day,
in Indianapolis.
And he's playing well. I think Rod has him playing well. Those guys are playing really good football. They're playing fast.
Okay, good to see you, Rod.
Always good to see you.
Thanks for coming in here, Rod Woodson, one of the Purdue Boilermaker finest, who threw Drew Brees under the bus.
I love you, Drew.
Boiler on boiler violence, right there.
I love you, Drew.
How dare that happen? All right, good to see you, Rod. Sending you up the 405 to NFL Network. Catch him on NFL Total Access tonight at 7 Eastern. By the way, that aforementioned Browns-Broncos game is on NFL Network on Saturday night at 8:20 p.m. Eastern after the Texans and the Jets. And then you on Westwood One have Sunday Night Football.
I get to see what Nick Foles is going to do.
I know, right? I know.
Does he bring back the magic?
Actually, can you stay one more segment?
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. Rod Woodson, one more segment with Rod when we come back. You mentioned Nick Foles as we went to break, and I'm like, let's stick around. Let Rod spend a couple minutes on what do you think the Eagles are going to do with Nick Foles? Because they could run it back, right?
They could
put
run
out
it
the
back.
dog masks and see how it goes, or they just don't have the same team.
Well, the back end on the defensive side, they're banged up and beat up. Their defense is on the back end is not making the plays that it did last year. But then all the special plays that they did a year ago on offense, it's not working either.
Right.
So is Nick Foles that guy that brings that little magic touch back? Just think if they come out here. I know it's a big if, but if they come out here, they beat the Rams, they win their final 2 games, there's going to be some big question marks in Philly, like who should be the starting quarterback.
Isn't that amazing?
And they kept him on the roster and paid them the money for one reason, for this possibility.
Well, let's put up the NFC playoff picture for 2 reasons. One, because it's really fascinating. And 2, I can't wait to get Rod's reaction on how we're referring to the teams that are in the hunt here on the Rich Eisen Show.
It's close.
You got
right
the Vikings at 6-6-1. Then you've got 3 teams at 6-7: Panthers, Eagles, and Redskins. The Packers are 5-7-1. Right. And you could see there are the division leaders: Saints, Rams, Bears, Cowboys. Wild card leaders: Seahawks and Vikings. You want to read out the other category? We don't say in the hunt here. Do you see that?
You're sniffing it. I don't know.
What do you think?
Sniffing?
Well, the playoffs. You're sniffing it.
No, it's pretty funny because we used to call a position that the receiver would come in and be right off the tackle. We would call that a sniff position.
The sniff position. Why do you call it that?
No reason.
There is a reason, or you just don't want to say.
There is a reason, but I'm not going to say it on air. But look at that. I mean, the Eagles are right there.
They are. They're a half game out.
And just a big if. They come out here, beat the Rams, which is a big if, but then they win their final 2 games, and say they get that 6th spot.
Yep.
You're going to tell me in Philly they're not going to be arguing about and talking about who should be the starting quarterback from now on?
Well, Philly, they'll just argue anyway, but yes, I understand what you're saying. I've got another one, though, for you.
Who's that?
Packers beat the Bears. Throw the records out. We all know.
Oh.
Packers have the same team. It's just different coach right now. Aaron Rodgers
comes in. They played well last week.
I'm just saying.
They put up some points.
They do that. Then they beat the Jets. Then they go home and finish out the season to finish 8-7-1 as Green Bay is home against Detroit.
Yeah.
Minnesota drops one. As we all know, it's entirely possible. They've got Miami. They've got at Detroit home for Chicago.
Did they get is there a return policy on giving that guaranteed money out to the quarterback?
Oh, do you think they kept the receipt?
I don't think they did. I know they wish they did.
Oh, my gosh. Good to see you, Rod.
It's good to see you, Rich.
What do you think of, we don't say in the hunt here, sniffing it.
I like sniffing it.
You do?
I do.
That's a great
I just want to know what sniffing is, though.
Well,
what are we sniffing? We're sniffing. We smell the playoffs.
Yes. You're sniffing it.
Yeah, I like it.
The aroma. Like it. The aroma of the playoffs is around there. And
it's like being in the kitchen.
It's like the roses.
Up there,
you smell
hungry.
the roses.
Yeah. Now you got it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Let's try it on for size. Take that back to the NFL Network.
I'm going to do that.
Because you're going to get there before I will. Thanks for coming here, Rod.
Good to be here.
That's Rod Woodson. When we come back, the news update from Philly and Jeffrey Ross and Dave Attell in person.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.